oh boy, I tell you.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. I'm back again. I was here earlier this morning and now I'm back. I hope you had a chance to see that interview I did with Claire Daly early this morning. I was really excited to talk to her. She had a lot to say and really gave me some inspiration about how we can probably do things a little bit differently in this country in reference to movements and workers' rights, etc. Today has not been the best day. I've not had the best day today. Minus that interview earlier this morning. I just we're gonna do call in later on tonight, and we can talk then. But welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right, guys, we are going to get into it tonight. I have some pretty interesting stories to talk about tonight. But let's first and foremost go ahead and shout out Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. You keep doing the damn thing. All right. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there as well. And I want to go ahead and give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Ugana Wasu. Thank you so much and welcome. All right. Want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat and then we'll go ahead and get started. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, every time I wear blue, I look a little orange on here. I think it's the lighting. I don't know. Shout out to Joe OWS says Robbie hates the First Amendment while addressing AOC. Sula, along with Roger Meadows, were exercising their First Amendment rights to freedom of assembly, speech, and address grievances. Shame on you. What's going on, Ben, who's a Sabby member, says Sabby rocks. Thank you so much. Shout out to Miguel, says peace. Greetings, not enough cereal. That's an interesting name. Don't sweat the Marianne interview. I was amazed that was even scheduled, honestly. Yeah, well, I've interviewed Marianne on, or at least on this show, I've interviewed her twice, I believe. But yeah, man, I don't know, man. I'm feeling a little deflated. Shout out to Karen says, in my honest opinion, you showed us who Marianne Williamson was. Don't worry about looking professional. She also is trying to divide RBN by offering you another interview. Well, she has, like I said, I've interviewed her here before. Last year. Shout out to Miguel, says Marianne recognized Sabby's professionalism. That's always good. Greetings, Notori says, and I love RBN because they're not cookie cutter, wear suits. They are like everyday working people. Shout out to Hannah G, says everyone laying off people right now. This is wild. Yes. We're going to get into that tonight because the story we have tonight about Wall Street, it's Similar to what happened in '08, and that's what concerns me because I told you guys this before. I do not want to go back to 2008, the way that country, or the way this country was financially and economically. I don't want to revisit that, but based on what I've read, we could be heading back in that direction. So I can't wait to get into that story tonight. Shout out to brother Daniel, who's a Sabby member, says, hey to Miguel. Greetings, Robin says, must view YouTube right here, folks. Let's do this. Shout out to Hen's Teeth. At Miguel, Marianne didn't recognize Sabby's professionalism. She was trying to recruit another flying monkey. Completely disgusted me when she called Sabby dear. Well, Hen's Teeth, let us know how you really feel. Shout out to Joshua says, hope everyone is all good after having that horrible Marianne Williamson on earlier. Greeting Soul says, hi, everyone. Shout out to Sakudo says, hey, what's good, y'all? Greetings. The Jammin says, don't trust MW Sabby. Shout out to Kitty Loves Films. Hi, comrades. Today has been a crazy day. I've been posting nonstop. I think it's nonstop since noon. That stream at 3 p.m. was intense. Shout out to Ryan says, where's that Marianne video posted? I missed it. That's on RBN. Greetings, Dabby Dab says, what's up, Sabby fam? Don't forget to show the like button some love. That's right. Go ahead and Hulk smash that like button for me. Shout out to Terry Hinton says, hello, Sabby and chat. What's going on? Lorez says, greetings, Sabby, Eric, and Sabby fam. I agree with you, Sabby and Nick. The end there at RBN earlier wasn't professional. We can talk about it on call-in tonight. I have a different topic scheduled, but you guys know how call-ins go. People bring up all sorts of things. Shout out to Bizarro Joe says, evening, everyone. And shout out to Lawrence Johnson, who is a Sabby member, giving a shout out there to Sakudo. Thank you so much for the super sticker, JM. JM is also a Sabby member. Shout out to the Oracle at Delphi. Oh my, RBN lost its footing today. We can talk about it tonight, you guys. We can talk about it tonight. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get into the stories I have scheduled for tonight. Let's go ahead and share that thumbnail. I think these stories are pretty interesting. It's a mixture of things. Tonight, we are going to discuss Brianna Joy Gray, Robbie Sove, and Olayemi Olorin debate. That is going to be an interesting discussion. If you have not seen the viral video going around on Twitter of the young man who actually flagged the police down for help and was later tased apparently multiple times by the police and then died, we're going to get into that discussion. There was a debate about that on Rising. You guys told me to check out that video, so I did check that out. So we're going to discuss that tonight. I'm also going to discuss Joe Biden's horrible pick for chief of staff. Who is Jeff Zients and why is he problematic, especially for those of you who really care about something like Medicare for all? And we're also going to discuss Wall Street layoffs. Yes, it has been announced. And this is the thing I was telling you about, that it kind of reminds me of 2008. And I said I didn't want to go back there, but there is a concern there. And I do want to make sure we cover that tonight. And I'm also going to cover 3 more of those ballot initiatives for Louisiana. Like I told you guys before, Louisiana has a lot of them. So I've been kind of splitting them up over the nights. Like I think this state has the most from what I've seen so far. So let's go ahead and hop right into Louisiana. Okay, so let's get started with the Louisiana Amendment 8. Now, this is removal of special assessment property tax annual income recertification for permanently disabled homeowners. Now, this measure was approved by 54.72%. So this is another one about property taxes. I told you those have been coming up with multiple states that I've discussed. Okay, so for this one, a yes vote supported removing the requirement to annually recertify income for homeowners that are permanently and totally disabled in order to keep their special assessment level for property taxes. What did this amendment change about the special reassessment level annual income recertification? The constitutional amendment removed the annual income recertification requirement for homeowners receiving a special property tax assessment level that are permanently and totally disabled, or for their surviving spouses. The Louisiana Constitution provides a special assessment level limiting the total assessment of a property from increasing above the assessment level in the first year that a property owner receives the assessment level. A special assessment level freezes the assessed value of a residential property and therefore also freezes the amount of property taxes owed, unless the tax rate is increased in the parish. A special assessment level is attached to the property as long as the individual owns it. The applicant's spouse inherits the property and also meets the income limitation, or the property of the value does not increase by 25% due to structural improvements. The special assessment level is available for property owners receiving a homestead exemption and those who are 65 old or older, veterans with a service-connected disability rating of 50% or more. Let me explain what that means really quick. My dad, for example, is 100% disabled. He's a veteran. So there are different levels of disability. I know this may sound kind of silly, but there are actual different levels. Some people may have like 50% disability. A lot of times in those cases, they can still work. But then you have people who have 100% disability who, and actually in some of those cases, some of those people can still work too. It depends on what the disability is. But there's a difference between that 100% and that 50%. For example, because my dad is 100% disabled veteran, my sister was able to go to any state college in his state for free. So if you're 50% disabled veteran, she would have not been able to do that. So there are differences with the percentage. Just wanted to point that out really quick. Members of the U.S. or Louisiana National Guard who were killed or missing in action, or a prisoner of war for 90 days or more, or determined by a court or state or federal agency as being permanently and totally disabled. So a person receiving the special assessment level may not have an adjusted gross income over $100,000. The $100,000 income limit was set to be adjusted annually by the Consumer Price Index beginning in 2026. For those who are married filing separately, the adjusted gross income is determined by both individuals' incomes. Going into the election, property owners receiving special assessment level, except those who are 65 years old or older, need to annually certify their income from the prior tax year with the parish assessor. Individuals who do not qualify for a special assessment level are subject to the property value reassessments that could increase the amount of property taxes owed. And we've gone over the property taxes, how they work in Louisiana before. Who supported it? State Rep and amendment sponsor Matthew Willard. And it seems that nobody seemed to oppose this ballot measure. And again, there was no money spent to support it or oppose it in reference to campaign finance. Now, here's a note here from Roger Meadows. Don't see the difference between this amendment and Amendment 5. They look similar, but this one got ratified and the other one didn't. Yeah, because that's what I was saying. We talked about this before with Louisiana about the property taxes and for those who are veterans that are disabled, et cetera. But there may be one tweak in here. But yeah. So moving on to the next one. This is Louisiana Amendment 1, Citizen Requirement for Voting Measure. A yes vote supported amending the Louisiana Constitution to provide that no person who is not a citizen of the United States shall be allowed to register and vote in this state. This passed by 73.44%. So that one's interesting. So again, that means if you're not a citizen, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you cannot vote in Louisiana. Who supported this? State Representative and amendment sponsor Debbie Valillo and Louisiana Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin. They're both Republicans. Here are the arguments. So Debbie said that the amendment was necessary to prevent local governments from giving non-citizens the ability to vote in certain local elections. And Kyle said, what I'm doing is I'm trying to plug a gap that I see that could possibly occur that could create chasms in our system, and I want to avoid that as much as possible. Ardoin explained that the current language in the Constitution referring to being a citizen of the state is confusing because a foreign citizen can be a Louisiana resident or a citizen of Louisiana, and someone could interpret the language as allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections in Louisiana. He also said that the amendment would prevent a local government from allowing non-citizens to vote. If any of you are in the chat and you live in Louisiana, let me know. Opposed arguments. So here are some of the oppositions. State Rep Candace Newell said, Newell proposed making the change via statute, state law, rather than through a constitutional amendment requiring voter approval in an effort to contain most of the debate within the legislature. Representative Woody said it is impossible to be a Louisiana citizen and not be a citizen of the United States. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. And Representative Royce said he agreed with the substance of the bill, stating that only U.S. citizens have the right to vote. He also said that the problem with a ballot measure like this is that it's going to lead to further division and further skepticism being fed around the election integrity process, and that this notion that you have all of these illegals or people who don't belong here or people who are some kind of way being snuck into the country who shouldn't be voting that are voting, and we now have to put this on the ballot. So that is that. And we're going to do one more here for tonight. This is Louisiana Amendment 2, Senate confirmation for appointees to State Civil Service Commission measure. A yes vote supported requiring Senate confirmation of State Civil Service Commission appointees after they are appointed by the governor. This passed by 70.92%. A little bit of background here. The Louisiana State Constitution defines the state civil service as all persons holding offices and positions of trust or employment in the employ of the state or any instrumentality thereof, and any joint state and federal agency, joint state and parochial agency, or joint state and municipal agency, regardless of the source of funds used to pay for such employment. The Constitution divides civil service employees as classified and unclassified, and provides that all positions not listed under unclassified are classified positions. Unclassified civil service employees include, and I'm not going to say all of these, but elected officials or persons appointed to fill vacancies in elective offices, the heads of each principal executive department appointed by the governor, the mayor, or the governing authority of a city, city attorneys, registrars of voters, members of the state and city boards, authorities, and commissions, one private secretary to the president of each college or university, etc. Who supported it? The New Orleans Advocate Editorial Board. Because civil service is such an important function of the government, we see no grave harms in confirmation, so long as CABL helpfully points out that the Senate policies its processes to avoid politicizing these decisions. Again, no opposition and no money in reference to campaign finance to support it or to oppose it. And that actually might be, so we'll get to the other ones tomorrow. I think there's only like one or two left there for Louisiana. We'll finish that up tomorrow, and then we'll dive into the wonderful crab state of Maryland. That's where my family is from. So I'll be interested to hear what happened there. But that is Louisiana, folks, at least part of it for tonight. Going to go to some of the comments here. Oh, thanks, Terry. Sabby interview with Claire was fantastic. Thanks so much. I learned so much during that interview. Like, the big thing for me was when I I did ask her how elections work like in Ireland, and they have a different system, a different process. Like she was saying how the state like helps fund the elections, so they don't really have to worry about the corporate money conflict that we have to deal with in this country. Also, Claire is an independent, and I asked her like how are independents winning there, and they struggle so hard to win here. And she talked about the fact that when we vote, we have a choice of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it sounded like they have ranked choice voting. So I learned a lot. Scarlett says, my boyfriend was laid off today. I'm so sorry to hear that. Scarlett, a friend of mine was laid off about a week ago, and she works in healthcare. Betsy says, still glowing from Sabby plus Claire this morning. What a dynamic duo. Thank you so much. Shout out to Aberdeen71 for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Hen's Teeth said, I grew up in New Orleans. Awesome. Hen's Teeth, I have been told that the only place I should go to get gumbo is New Orleans. And I've had gumbo in North Carolina and South Carolina, but I've been told that nothing compares to the gumbo that's in New Orleans. And Janae says, New Orleans in the building. All right. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our second story. Every now and then I like to talk about economics. I like to mix it up a little bit here. And I figured you guys really want to know about this. This is an important discussion. Wall Street has announced that they are prepping for layoffs. And apparently these layoffs are going to be the biggest since 2008. Now, I want to give a quick shout out here to Case Study QB. He's always doing the damn thing. I want to show this video clip here first. And then I have an article that I want to show you as well, because we really need to be prepared for this. Anytime we start to hear that Wall Street is talking about layoffs or any type of economic failure coming our way, we need to keep our eyes and our ears open to this type of information. So here we go.
The New York Post reports that Wall Street is preparing for its biggest round of layoffs since 2008. Scott Shellady joins me.
Can we do a volume booster for this one, Eric? Thanks so much. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys.
That Wall Street is preparing for its biggest round. The New York Post reports that Wall Street is preparing for its biggest round of layoffs since 2008. Scott Shellady joins me. What's this going to do to the economy? All these layoffs across the board.
Well, you know what, Stuart, the first thing people say is everybody overhired after the pandemic. And I think that's a load of garbage, because it doesn't matter why they hired or overhired.
What is this guy wearing? I just realized this, like, when I listened to this before, I wasn't really paying attention to the visual per se, because I was kind of listening, but I'm like, what? WWE villain? I just noticed this, like, what is he wearing? Oh, no. Huh. Okay, sorry.
Layoffs since 2008. Scott Shellady joins me. What's this going to do to the economy? All these layoffs across the board.
Well, you know what, Stuart, the first thing people say is everybody overhired after the pandemic. And I think that's a load of garbage, because it doesn't matter why they hired or overhired. All we know is that they see something coming that maybe the Fed doesn't see coming, or at least the administration for sure doesn't see coming, and that's a bad economy.
I just want to pause there for just a second, because he said that people overhired during the pandemic or after the pandemic. But if that's the case, then why are there all these vacant positions? I could go down the street right now to the Dunkin' Donuts, and I guarantee you there's a now hiring sign. Same thing with the Starbucks. Same thing with the Chipotle. These are all in the same plaza. Same thing with the Chipotle. Any business I go to right now, as at least here in Massachusetts, there's a now hiring sign. So if that's true that they overhired after the pandemic, then why are there all these vacant positions? I think we should question that. All right, let's go back to I don't know why, you guys. I see you guys saying in the chat, why is he dressed like a cat? I don't know what's happening here. I really don't know. I've never seen a suit like this before. I've never seen a cow suit. Like, is this like a cow blazer or something? I don't know what's happening here. Let me go on.
They see something coming that maybe the Fed doesn't see coming, or at least the administration for sure doesn't see coming, and that's a bad economy. And if you have to fire all those people, I mean, look, your own Microsoft, I know how much you like it. When they're having to fire people that actually program and write code, that's not good. And I think that's you're firing people that are going to be making the money for some of these banks. So I often wrestle with the fact that a lot of these layoffs have not come through in these jobs numbers yet. But I'll tell you right now, if I have to listen to the Wall Street or I have to listen to Amazon about what they see with their management systems coming around the corner when it comes to the economy, I'm going to trust them more than the administration or the Fed, because these people have skin in the game, Stuart. They have skin in the game. They want to be able to make money and stay solvent, where the government really doesn't have to act as fast as they'd like, and the administration can just outright ignore it.
Yeah, I don't know about the outfit. It is very distracting. I'm not sure what's really happening there. But to that point, notice that they mentioned Microsoft. This is what I was telling you guys about before, that Microsoft, Google, Amazon have announced that they've laid off thousands of workers. So the tech industry is laying off people heavily. I think that's something that, at least for friends of mine that have tech jobs, they did not see coming. And I think they thought they were pretty secure in those positions, the software engineers, the computer programmers. But apparently that is not necessarily the case. If you're laying off the tech industry, I wonder where they're going to go. I guess they can go towards like other startups, maybe. I don't know, but thousands of people they're laying off. And so I do want to go to that New York Post article.
Wall Street is preparing for its biggest round of layoffs since.
I don't know why that started again. I want to dive into that a little bit deeper. So it says that Wall Street reportedly preps for the biggest round of layoffs since 2008. So I told you we're going back there again. Sabby don't like. So let's go on. Banks are preparing to lay off tens of thousands of workers in an industry-wide bloodbath that's expected to become Wall Street's largest since the 2008 financial crisis, according to a report. I sincerely hope more people are talking about this, because this is scary. This is very scary. The banks are preparing to do so. So when the banks get hit, you know you need to be concerned. The mass firings are looming after banks built up their workforces over the last 2 years as mergers and acquisitions, initial public offerings, and SPACs flooded in. Now it says that the mass firings are looming after banks. Guys, you pay attention to the vocabulary here. See, in this paragraph, it says the mass firings, but in the first paragraph, it says layoff. Which is it? Are they fired or are they laid off? Come on, New York Post. Which is it? Are they being fired or are they being laid off? Those are two different things. I want to point out they're not the same. It's not the same. One of these things is not like the other. The mass firings are looming after banks built up their workforces over the last 2 years as mergers, acquisitions, initial public offerings, and SPAC flooded in. At the same time, most banks had halted their annual culling of 1% to 5% during the pandemic. Now, some banks are facing investment banking revenues that have been cut in half, even as payrolls have ballooned. You know whose pay has not been cut in half? The CEOs. The CEOs, I'm sure they're not losing any pay. I'm sure they're not having any pay cuts. I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be all right. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse, and Bank of New York Mellon have already slashed more than 15,000 jobs combined over the past few months. Now, that is coming from the Financial Times. By the way, guys, I'm subscribed to them. You should do so if you can. I think it's like $1 a month or something like that. $1 a week or $1 a month. Might be a month or whatever. But They have some pretty interesting information on there. 15,000 jobs, you guys. This is insane. Those cuts could be just the beginning, according to some industry insiders. Banks hired in a crazy fashion over the last few years. That's coming from John, who's the CEO of recruiting firm Brute and Smith. So far, these layoffs have been normal retrenchment, but things could get worse. All right, so we're warning you now. This is why I'm warning people now. It says here, David Solomon, who's the CEO of Goldman Sachs, slashed 3,200 jobs just this month alone. So Goldman Sachs, which is often seen as one of the more aggressive banks when it comes to slashing its workforce, cut roughly 3,200 employees, or 6.5% of its employee base earlier this month. A move that could also be putting pressure on other banks to follow suit. Other bank executives are being asked, do we have our head counts? I told you guys, I've been living here for too long and I'm starting to lose letters in my words. I'm not kidding. Like I catch myself every now and then, instead of saying order, I catch myself saying order. It's a Boston thing. Do we have our head count at the right level given economic conditions? Although Goldman cut a similar amount of staff following the financial crisis, the size of the bank was closer to 33,000 employees, far smaller than the nearly 50,000 employees Goldman had just 1 month ago. Last month, Morgan Stanley axed roughly 1,800 employees, closer to 2% of its global workforce. The company's CEO, James Gorman, said the bank was frankly a little overdue for a trim since it hadn't done anything for a couple of years. Well, that's interesting. Okay. It hadn't done anything. Bank of New York Mellon, the Financial Times reports, is making smaller cuts, getting rid of roughly 1,500 employees, or 3% of its workforce. And that's this gentleman here. Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan said there are no plans for mass layoffs. That's probably because Bank of America, I'll pull this list up for you in a second. Bank of America is one of the top 10 banks in the world. And most of the banks in the top 10 are from China. That's probably why. We'll look at that list again. Some banks have yet to announce any cuts. Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan said the company didn't have any plans for mass layoffs. He also said there may be a slowdown in hiring, but nothing beyond that. They need to hire some people for those customer service positions. Customer service at Bank of America is horrible. Horrible. I tell you from experience. I used to bank with Bank of America. The customer service is terrible. I don't care if you go talk to them in person or if it's the customer service phone line. That's even worse that you have to go through. It is just not good. Bad Cookie said, make Bank of America great again. Oh, man. Citigroup has yet to address whether it will lay off employees, but its chief financial officer, Mark Mason, acknowledged where necessary to restructure. We do that as well. Credit Suisse will see the most dramatic cuts. The Swiss bank is cutting 9,000 roles from its 52,000 person workforce, or 17%, as the troubled bank tries to restructure. Of course, layoffs typically happen at the least convenient time for workers to find another job. No kidding. Who wrote this article? You have this horrible flood of quality coming onto the market, but who picks them up? That's coming from Thacker. He said this to the Financial Times. The buy side isn't there to hire these people this time. They just don't have the capacity. Whew. This is all too much today. Like, it gives me '08 vibes, man. It really does. That's why I was just like, when I heard this was kind of like '08, I was like, oh no. Now I want to go ahead and bring up that list again of the top banks in the world, because I think that's important. Let me pull this up. And I want to look at the global. I don't like looking at, we can look at if we want to, right? Top 10 banks in the world. We can look at the top banks in the US, but I want you to see this from a global perspective, because why did they do it like that? What in the world? Where did it go? Because I want you to see the wealth and how it is distributed. I'm very picky about what I show you, because some of these are not like, I like to just show a table and not like have to go through an essay. Top banks in the world. Okay, yeah, that's better. Thank you. We'll do Lexus. Lexus is so much better at this. I'm just gonna cut there and go over here. Go over here. Doop doop doop. Is that there? Okay, and let me share. All right, the top 50 banks in the world. We're just gonna look at the top 10, because after that, it's kind of like who are these people and who are these banks? And what I want to show you here is the first column is the current rank, and the second column is the previous rank. So what it was before. Most of them have stayed the same. There's a difference with Bank of America. I do remember that one though. But the top 10 banks in the world. The first one is Industrial and Commercial Bank of China Limited. So that's 1 for China. 2, China Construction Bank Corporation. So that's 2. Agricultural Bank of China Limited is number 3. That's 3 in the top 10 that are from China. Bank of China Limited, number 4, that's 4. BNP Paribas SA is 5. JP Morgan Chase Bank is 6. That is the first US bank to crack the top 10. 7, Credit Agricole SA is number 7. China Development Bank is number 8. That's 5 for China. And then 9 is MUFG Bank Limited. So you see here, it's 9 this time around, but the year before, previously, it was ranked number 10. And then you have Bank of America that just, inches into the top 10 at number 10. And that's also for the US. So out of the top 10 banks in the world, 2 are from the United States. 5 of them are from China, from what I see. And you can also see that Bank of America in the previous year was ranked number 9. So it's actually fallen a spot. And we can scroll down and take a look at the other ones. The next time you see another American bank, it looks like Wells Fargo, and that's ranked number 17. But for most of them, China has most of the banks that are in the top 10. So this is just something you guys need to see. Eric, could you put the link to this in the chat? So if people want to look at the entire list, they can do so. I just think it's important for people to see that. And I want to show you something else too, because I forgot to put this in here. Yeah, we're gonna talk about this, because what I want to show you, we're not going to be able to show the whole thing, but a very quick crash course about what happened in '08. So we're going to look at that really quick, because if we have this warning right now from Wall Street that, hey, guess what? We're about to do massive layoffs, then we all need to be paying attention, because what does that mean for the housing market, right? Like, how do we get here? So let's go ahead and take a look at just a quick crash course of what happened during the
Welcome
'08
to Crash Course
crisis.
Economics. My name is Jacob Clifford.
And I'm Adrienne Hill.
And we're going to skip past you guys. We don't really need to hear all that. There we go.
To explain what happened, first we have to do a quick explainer about mortgages. And you might already know this, but basically someone that wants to buy a house will often borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars from a bank. In return, the bank gets a piece of paper called a mortgage. Every month, the homeowner has to pay back a portion of the principal plus interest to whomever holds the piece of paper. If they stop paying, that's called a default, and whomever holds that piece of paper gets the house. The reason I'm saying whomever holds the paper rather than the bank is because the bank, the original lender, often sells that mortgage to some third party. And the reason I say often is because this happens all the time. I've had my house for 9 months and 3 different banks have had the mortgage. Traditionally, it was pretty hard to get a mortgage if you had bad credit or didn't have a steady job. Lenders just didn't want to take the risk that you might default on your loan. But all that started to change in the 2000s. And before we go further, a quick aside here. The story gets complicated fast, and it's a fascinating story, but we're trying to keep it relatively simple. So I've asked Stan if we could put some additional resources in the YouTube description. And Stan said yes. Thanks, Stan. Anyway, back to our story. In the 2000s, investors in the US and abroad looking for a low-risk, high-return investment started throwing their money at the US housing market. The thinking was they could get a better return from the interest rates homeowners paid on mortgages than they could by investing in things like US Treasury bonds, which were paying very, very low interest. But big money global investors didn't want to just buy up my mortgage and Stan's mortgage. It's too much hassle to deal with us as individuals. I mean, we're pains. Instead, they bought investments called mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed securities are created when large financial institutions securitize mortgages. Basically, they buy up thousands of individual mortgages, bundle them together, and sell shares of that pool to investors. Investors gobbled these mortgage-backed securities up. Again, they paid a higher rate of return than investors could get in other places, and they looked like really safe bets. For one, home prices were going up and up, so lenders thought, worst case scenario, the borrower defaults on the mortgage, we can just sell the house for more money. At the same time, credit ratings agencies were telling investors these mortgage-backed securities were safe investments. They gave a lot of these mortgage-backed securities AAA ratings, the best of the best. And back when mortgages were only for borrowers with good credit, mortgage debt was a good investment. Anyway, investors were desperate to buy more and more and more of these securities. So lenders did their best to help create more of them. But to create more of them, they needed more mortgages. So lenders loosened their standards and made loans to people with low income and poor credit. You'll hear these called
subprime mortgages. I was waiting for it to get to the word, but yes, they gave mortgages to people that had low credit and low incomes. And you guys know how I feel about like credit scores. Like I feel like the whole credit rating system is a scam to begin with anyway, because if you don't have any credit, that means if you haven't taken out any credit cards or you don't own anything like that, if you don't have any credit, you technically have bad credit. Make it make sense. You technically have bad credit, right? And then if you make a couple of mistakes, depending on what those credit mistakes are, it can stay on your credit report for 7 years. And I've also said this before too, if you come back and you're able to pay off the debt that you owe, it still doesn't matter. It still stays on your credit report for 7 years. So it still impacts your credit. And that's why the whole credit rating thing to me, it's a hot mess. I'm fortunate. I don't have bad credit, but I will tell you one thing. It is very hard once you have bad credit to get good credit because it stays on the credit report for 7 years. Even if you've paid it off, it's a hot mess. But yeah, she's correct. Subprime mortgages.
Subprime mortgages. Eventually, some institutions even started using what are called predatory lending practices to generate mortgages. They made loans without verifying income and offered absurd adjustable rate mortgages with payments people could afford at first, but quickly ballooned beyond their means. But these new...
Meaning the mortgages increased. I want to add that in there for people who are not aware. You have a mortgage amount that you can afford maybe in the beginning, but over time, the mortgage would increase. There's a documentary about this called The Con. Definitely check it out. I think you can stream it on Amazon Prime. It might be still on there, but they go through this, a whole documentary, different episodes where they talk about exactly what happened.
Subprime lending practices were brand new. That meant credit rating agencies could still point to historical data that indicated mortgage debt was a safe bet. but it wasn't. These investments were becoming less and less safe all the time. But investors trusted the ratings and kept pouring in their money. Traders also started selling an even riskier product called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. And again, some of these investments were given the highest credit ratings from the ratings agencies, even though many of them were made up of these incredibly risky loans. While the investors and traders and bankers were throwing money into the U.S. housing market, the price of homes in the U.S. was going up and up and up. The new lax lending requirements and low interest rates drove housing prices higher, which only made the mortgage-backed securities and CDOs seem like an even better investment. If the borrowers defaulted, the bank would still have this super valuable house, right? No, wrong. Let's go to the thought bubble. Actually, let's go to the housing bubble. You remember bubbles, right? Rapid price increases driven by irrational decisions. Well, this was a bubble, and bubbles have an annoying tendency to burst. And this one did. People just couldn't pay for their incredibly expensive houses or keep up with their ballooning mortgage payments. Borrowers started defaulting, which put more houses back on the market for sale. But there weren't
one thing that she's leaving out that they do reveal in the documentary The Con is that some of these homeowners were people that already owned their home. So some of the people that were conned were people that already had paid it off or were almost there to paying it off. A lot of them were older people, elders, Black elders, people who they pretty much figured were not going to read through the fine print. They were also forging signatures for homeowners as well. By the way, none of these people went to jail. None of them, not one. So when you hear people get really upset at Obama and say you bailed out Wall Street instead of bailing out the American people, this is what they are referring to. The fact that those people lost their homes and Wall Street still got a chance to operate and function. Nobody went to jail.
Buyers. So supply was up, demand was down, and home prices started collapsing. As prices fell, some borrowers suddenly had a mortgage for way more than their home was currently worth. Some stopped paying. That led to more defaults, pushing housing prices down further. As this was happening, the big financial institutions stopped buying subprime mortgages, and subprime lenders were getting stuck with bad loans. By 2007, some really big lenders had declared bankruptcy. The problem spread to the big investors who'd poured money into these mortgage-backed securities and CDOs, and they started losing money on their investments. A bunch of money. But wait, there's more. There was another financial instrument that financial institutions had on their books that exacerbated all of these problems. Unregulated over-the-counter derivatives, including something called credit default swaps that were basically sold as insurance against the default of mortgage-backed securities. Does AIG ring a bell? It sold tens of billions of dollars worth of these insurance policies without money to back them up when things went wrong. And as we mentioned, things went terribly wrong. These credit default swaps were also turned into other securities that essentially allowed traders to bet huge amounts of money on whether the values of mortgage securities would go up or down. All these bets, these financial instruments resulted in an incredibly complicated web of assets, liabilities, and risks, so that when things started going bad, they went bad for the entire financial system. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Some major financial players declared bankruptcy, like Lehman Brothers. Others were forced into mergers or needed to be bailed out by the government. No one knew exactly how bad the balance sheets at some of these financial institutions really were. These complicated, unregulated assets made it hard to tell. Panic set in. Trading and the credit markets froze. The stock market crashed. And the U.S. economy suddenly found itself in a disastrous recession.
So what did the government do?
Okay, and then we'll stop it there. I can come back to that video another time, but yeah, that's what happened. So Wall Street is laying off people. The banks are laying off people. Hopefully the housing industry is not affected. Hopefully it's not. But we'll have to wait and see. Probably not a good time to buy a home right now, though. Like, I'm not a finance expert, but probably not the best time to go buy a house right now. Just saying. All right. I'll take those comments on Rockfan and we'll move on to the next story. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sabby, one more to go. You can do it. And thank you for this tip as well. This is the perfect opportunity for my vision of a government agency called Cooperative Business Administration that provide a pathway for startup co-ops to provide counseling, tax resources, a voice in government, government contracting, consultation, education, training, financing, research, all to make it easier to form business cooperatives from scratch or to aid in the conversion process. When purchasing from the owner of a corporation, when applying right of first refusal laws, public banks also to insulate your economy. Stop looking at glass half empty, people. This is a new beginning. Let's get them CBIs popping, people. It's January. We got 18 months to get them on the ballot and time's a ticking. Woohoo! Nationalize the banks or put them out of business with public banks. By the way, I'm in Massachusetts. If you're in Massachusetts, if anybody here wants to try to get something started for a public bank, email me. I am interested. Desert Mantis said, I'm voting Roger Meadows for president. I hear you, man. I hear you. Speaking of President Joe Biden has decided to appoint a new chief of staff. His name is Jeff Zients, and you should be very concerned about Jeff. So did I miss chats? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the super chat, Penman. You're the best, Sabby. Keep up the good work. Thanks so much, Penman. Thanks for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Moo, look at me. I'm a cow in blackface. Oh my God. I don't know what that guy was wearing. Bryce says the layoffs are to make the books look good. Bad Cookie says it looks like all the coal miners that learned to code after Obama will have to start driving Uber. Drive says, Sabby, you get a Boston accent when you get angry. Do I? I'll have to pay attention to that. Desert Manta says it's obvious that the Russians must be the blame for these cuts. Lawrence, belt tightening and austerity for us. The Oracle says now the former bank workers can fill the openings at Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's. Ouch. Ouch. Red, can anyone imagine a third-party indie candidate running on a platform to convert private banks into state-owned banks like North Dakota? Or am I nuts? You are not nuts, Red. That's a good idea. Behind the Fern, capitalism suck worse than Dak Prescott. That is my laugh for the night. You made me laugh tonight, Behind the Fern. Capitalism sucks worse than Dak Prescott in the playoffs. All my friends that are Cowboy fans, they're always telling me, we them boys. And they were really silent when the Cowboys lost over the weekend. Joe says what screwed up the whole thing was Bill Clinton allowed the merger of investment banking with commercial banks, turning the banking industry into a Las Vegas slot machine. Betsy says 100% Sabby will email you about a BI for public bank. My state senator, Jamie Eldridge, is very much in favor of it, though he is still a Dem. Interesting. Hit me up. Got to start something. But speaking of President Biden has appointed a new chief of staff. His name is Jeff Zients. I think we should be concerned. This is not someone that is going to be favorable in reference to progressive policies. And also, Jeff is straight up corporate. Now, I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB. I want to show this clip, and I have an article from Common Dreams I want to go to about Mr. Jeff and why you should be concerned. But shout out to Case for this clip. They're talking about the Jeff. Here we go.
Jeff Zients will become President Biden's new chief of staff. This follows the report that Ron claimed is stepping down from the role in coming weeks. Now, Zients helped oversee the White House's coronavirus response. What do you foresee will be his top priorities in his new position?
Oh, I can't say. I mean, I think that Ron Klain certainly was someone who was really masterful at holding the Democratic coalition together, at making progressives feel heard and included, and kind of integrating some of their priorities into what was often a more centrist agenda. Whether that's going, I don't think we know yet whether the new chief of staff represents a change in direction by the administration or just a change in personnel.
Jeff Zients.
It's definitely a change in direction, and we're going to get into that. I'm going to go ahead and put up that article from Common Dreams because, again, this is not someone who's in favor of progressive policies. Like I said, he is very corporate, and I think this should be very concerning to people as well because there have been talks about President Biden trying to privatize Medicare. So let's go into it. Again, this is from Common Dreams. Catastrophic decision, progressive rip choice of Jeff Zients for chief of staff. Zients, as a businessman, embodies much of the corporate misconduct the executive branch, led by a Democratic Party, ought to be cracking down on. Now, that's coming from a progressive strategist. So again, like I said, it doesn't necessarily represent just a change in the personnel, so to speak. It represents a change in direction. So moving further away from those progressive policies. So let's go on. Reports Sunday that President Joe Biden had chosen Jeff Zients to replace outgoing White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain were met with alarm among progressive watchdogs who pointed to Zients' disastrous tenure as the administration's pandemic czar, as well as his history in the corporate world, where he built a fortune investing in healthcare companies accused of fraud. I'm going to highlight this piece here. Now, this is the person that Joe Biden has appointed. An individual who represented companies or built a fortune, investing in healthcare companies that are accused of fraud. This is who he appoints. Complete opposite from the gentleman that was in this seat. Now, I don't know why Ron is stepping down. I didn't find information about that. But you should be alarmed. We're going to keep a watch on Jeff. Klain, who developed a solid working relationship with progressives in Congress, is expected to depart shortly after Biden's State of the Union address on February 7th. Oh, by the way, that should be interesting. Might have to stream that. Oh, boy. Revolving Door Project Executive Director Jeff Hauser called the elevation of Zients to White House Chief of Staff a catastrophic decision. He said in a statement that the Biden administration has been at its best when it has been on the attack against corporate excesses that wide majorities of Americans find abhorrent. Americans are appalled by profiting in healthcare. Jeff Zients has become astonishingly rich by profiteering in healthcare. Americans are aghast at how social media companies have built monopolies and violated privacy laws. Zients served on the board of directors of Facebook as it was defending itself against growing attacks from both political parties. So we have a guy here who was just not just a part of the corrupt healthcare industry, but he's also a part of the censorship lane from Facebook. That is just, it doesn't get any worse than that. It really doesn't. The Revolving Doors Project. Daniel and Max wrote for the American Prospect last year that Zients, who was replaced as the pandemic response coordinator back in April, has controlled and invested in and helped and oversee healthcare companies that were forced to pay tens of millions of dollars to settle allegations of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. And this is why I brought up the point that Joe Biden, there have been rumors of him trying to privatize Medicare. So let's make the connection here. Ron decides he's going to step down. Still don't know why Ron is leaving. Could have been tapped, could have been pushed out. We don't know. Ron decides to step down. He's someone that supported more of the progressive policies, the progressive stance. Biden appoints Jeff Zients to come in and fill that chief of staff role. And Jeff Zients is someone who is corporate. He was a part of the Facebook board. He was involved with these healthcare companies that are accused of fraud. And the fraud that they are accused of, they were They were forced to pay tens of millions of dollars to settle allegations of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. Let's connect the two. Why would you appoint, if you're trying to keep Medicare the way it is, which he has claimed, why would you appoint someone who was involved in these companies that were forced to pay millions for Medicare and Medicaid fraud? Why would you do that? Why would you do that unless you were trying to privatize Medicare? Does that sound like a president who wants to improve Medicare, who wants to extend Medicare? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Why would you appoint this guy? Let's go on. They have also been accused of surprise billing practices and even medical malpractice. Taken together, an examination of the companies that made Zients rich paints a picture of a man who seized on medical providers as a way to capitalize on the suffering of sick Americans. In the end, it seems to have paid off. So I'm going to see what Biden says at the State of the Union address, because if he gives any kind of chatter about helping people with health care in this country, you can call BS on that. Let's all remember this. The most egregious violation is documented in the 2015 Justice Department settlement announcement. Portfolio Logic, the investment firm Zients founded with his own money, agreed to pay almost $7 million to resolve allegations of fraudulent Medicare and Medicaid billing involving a subsidiary, Pediatric Services of American Healthcare, or PSA, that it purchased in 2007. Hopefully, Zients will prove us wrong, but unless that unlikely and fortuitous surprise occurs, Biden will need a quick hook. Progressives have also been highly critical of Zients' performance in government. In early 2022, Bogus Law urged that Biden administration to fire Zients over his failure to provide the materials necessary to improve the U.S. response to the pandemic or the guidance necessary to keep the pandemic under control. So this guy was also urged, or they urged Joe Biden to fire him when he was in charge of the pandemic control. So let's go on. Following news that he would be leaving the pandemic response post, Public Citizen's Robert Weissman lamented that Zients refused to pay appropriate attention to global solutions to the global pandemic because of political concerns or otherwise. And the Zients-led pandemic response refused to challenge Big Pharma's monopoly control in the U.S. and globally over technologies that relied crucially on public support. As a result, the United States and other rich countries failed to expand the jab supply sufficiently to meet global need. Without adequate supply, efforts to bolster low-income country distribution and delivery systems consequently have lagged and have been similarly under-resourced. During this time, as pandemic response coordinator, Zients was far and away the wealthiest member of Biden's cabinet, disclosing assets worth at least $89.3 million and as much as $442.8 million. Do you know what it must be like to have assets worth $89.3 million? Remember, these are things that he owns. He made this money off of sick people. There isn't a nicer way for me to put it. He made this money. He profited off of sick people, sick poor people, sick working class people. And this is who Biden appoints as the chief of staff. Citing the revolving doors project work, progressive strategist Murshid Zahid said Sunday that Zients, as a businessman, embodies much of a corporate misconduct the executive branch, led by a Democratic Party, ought to be cracking down on. But the Biden White House doesn't appear remotely concerned about Zients' corporate past. Of course not, because it's a corporate party. This is why, even if you have grassroots politicians a part of a corporate party, it doesn't make that much of a difference because the party is still corporate. And you still get things like this. With Biden expected to launch a bid for re-election in the coming weeks, the New York Times reported that the president could lean on Zients to help run the government while other advisors focus on the politics of winning a second term. Hauser said Sunday that hopefully Zients will prove us wrong, but unless that unlikely and fortuitous surprise occurs, Biden will need a quick hook. It's a corporate party. It's a corporate party. I'm going to wait for that State of the Union address. I'm going to wait for that. I dare him to say something about helping Americans with health care. I'll go to some of the comments here. Natalie says Medicare Advantage is private health care in disguise already. Yeah, that's another one where when I worked at the skilled nursing facility, some of the patients had that. Like they had Medicare and they had the Medicare Advantage, but you have a good point there. Red said privatization caused these problems. Of course they want to privatize their solutions. I hear you. I hear you. Corporate party, man. Like this is terrible. Terry said, this is awful. Wow, what a crook, Zients. Miguel, it's a corporate party and you're not in it. So a caller called in last week and said that the Democratic Party has been moving further to the left, and we had a big disagreement about this on Call In. For those of you who tuned in, you know what I'm talking about. I had a big disagreement about that. This is just another example. How is this moving further to the left? That's moving further to the right. You see, they got rid of the progressive guy. Again, we don't know why he's stepping down, but Ron is stepping down. He was the one that was more on board with the progressive policies, and they are replacing him with someone who is not. So please tell me again how the Democratic Party is supposedly moving further to the left. I come with receipts, boo. I come with receipts. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric, and we'll go to the next story. I look really orange on screen tonight. It's really weird. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Yep, Sabby, Senator James Eldridge is the author of the Massachusetts State Public Bank and Massachusetts Medicare for All. Take those bills and put towards CBI amendment. Okay, Sab, getting off and going on the Zoom with Physicians for National Healthcare Program to speak about ACO REACH program, Biden's plan to privatize Medicare. See what I was just telling you guys? We'll take notes. Lucy, if you are here, come on over, getting ready to start. You might have to DM Lucy, make sure she didn't forget. Okay, let's go into our final story. God, Colin is going to be interesting tonight. Oh my God. Let's go into our final story here. If you have not seen this debate that happened on Rising with Brie, Olayemi Lauren, and Robbie Sove about another police incident, we are going to go through part of this tonight. And I want to get your takes on this, how you feel this situation was handled. But for those who are not aware, there was a video, a viral video that went around on Twitter of a young man who is actually the cousin of one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. Now, from what I understand, and they're going to go through this, from what I understand, he was in an accident and he was trying to, I guess, flag down the police, go to the police for help. And he's the one that ended up dying in the end, not from gunshots, but from tasing. So let's go ahead and get started. This is it's a heated discussion, and I'll chime in here and there.
The family of Keenan Anderson has filed a $50 million claim against the Los Angeles Police Department on behalf of the deceased man's 5-year-old son. Anderson died on January 3rd after police tased him 6 times in 42 seconds. Anderson is a cousin to Black Lives Matter National co-founder Patrisse Cullors,
Patrisse Cullors, that was his name. That's the co-founder who Kenneth was related to for Black Lives Matter. So he was tased multiple times. And for those who are not aware, some may be wondering, well, how can someone die from that? Look, I know that is the safer form of retaliation if you are, or not retaliation. That's the safer form of defense when you compare it to guns, right? But here's the thing. Not everybody can necessarily tolerate tasing. I've heard also that if you may have like heart conditions, like that may be an issue. There's also this statement here. Some people are saying, and I don't know this for sure, but some people have been saying that he was on drugs or something like that. I don't know. Well, we'll get into it. But tasing is not necessarily safe for everyone. Depending on your health, yes, it can be a problem for people. Plus, he was tased multiple times in a short amount of time. So just keep that in mind. Let's get into it.
LAPD said in a press release that Anderson had been seen running in the middle of the street and exhibiting erratic behavior after flagging an officer down following a car accident. Body camera footage has since been released, warning it is disturbing.
Stop it, or I'm gonna tase you. Okay, stop it, or I'm gonna tase you. Stop it, or I'm gonna tase you. Stop resisting. Please. Stop resisting. Please. 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 I'm gonna tase him. I'm gonna tase him. They're trying to kill me. They're trying to kill me.
Let me give a little bit of context here. So the part you haven't seen yet is when, again, like he tried to flag the police down, and then we'll get into, they'll show the video footage, but before this, he was going away from the police. He was running out walking out towards the road, and they wanted him to get down on his knees, like, et cetera, et cetera. They started tasing him. Notice they started saying, stop resisting. That's all. They love that line, by the way. Stop resisting, stop resisting. But again, I want you to ask yourself as you listen to this debate, who was he harming at that point in time? This is not someone that was a suspect. It's not like the police were hunting for him. This is someone who asked the police, was trying to get the police to ask, to help them, right? So even if he was walking away, who was he harming at that point in time? And I want you to keep that question in your mind as you listen to this discussion, because was he a harm to someone else at that point in time? Something to think about.
Joining us now to weigh in is movement lawyer and political commentator Olayemi. Welcome back to the show, Olay.
Thank you for having me, y'all.
So it's worth noting there's a longer version of the video where he's on his knees with his hand behind his head complying. He says something about how he wants to be seen and then walks to the middle of the road so that there's more visibility. It seems like he was anticipating on some level an interaction just like this and being, George Floyded, as it were, as he put it. Can you help us unpack how something like this could have happened?
I mean, I guess there isn't really anything for us to unpack, right? Because it's not an anomaly. This is something that happens all the time. We see this quite literally all the time. LAPD killed 3 different Black men back to back at the top of the year. I know how it happens. Honestly, this is how the police often deal with Black men. His fare made sense to me. Their response, unfortunately, although that makes no sense, I see that very often, so it's routine. So there isn't anything really to unpack because this is the routine thing that we see. We see police murder, police kill a Black person that doesn't need to be killed, and then you immediately see the media start a campaign to justify it. And that's what we're seeing here from Keenan Anderson. Immediately, all of the narrative is, oh, cocaine and cannabis are found in the system as justifications to kill him, or, oh, he's not complying as justifications to kill him. But at no point are we saying that he's dangerous, that he poses a threat to these men, that there's any reason why he needs to be dead. Having cocaine or having weed in your system is not a reason why you need to be dead. It's also not a reason for the cops to act as judge, jury, and executioner. It's also important to remember they didn't know that. So how does that become a justification for why they kill him? Whether or not he's acting erratic or he's not complicit is not a reason to kill him.
That's a really good point there, because that's something that some people have been making that argument mainly on Twitter, that like, oh, well, he was on drugs. Like, how did the police know that? They didn't know that. They didn't have any proof of that at that point in time. Just something to keep in mind.
With all due respect, I strongly disagree, and I do disagree, Brianna, with how you characterize the additional video footage. I don't know if we have it to play it. You should watch it. It looks to me like he flees the police. He is told, this part of the video, he's told to kneel down. He does, but then he later gets back up. He runs off. He's in. Everyone can see him. This police officer who is telling him to do stuff is not aggressive with him. Does not treat him aggressively at all. He's running through traffic. I mean, the danger is that he could get hit by a car. He could put someone. He was just in a car crash. He's acting.
So remember that question I asked you right before we started this clip? That's why I asked that question. Robbie saying he was running out into the road, he's like endangering himself. Was he a danger to anyone else at that point in time? See, this is the question I've started to ask myself whenever I hear about these incidents with police brutality. Like I always go back to that question. Were they a danger to someone else at that time? And there's another one that I'm going to talk about tomorrow, which you may have heard about. This gentleman was beaten to death by the police, Black gentleman, and all the cops were Black that beat him. And I say this again, and I've said it before. Black police officers are blue first and Black second. They protect the badge and they protect that police union. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. But let's go on.
Radically, he did flee the police. They tackle him. I don't disagree with anything the police did at any point in this encounter until I get perhaps they tased him too many times.
Well, that's the bit, Robbie.
Or perhaps when they killed him. That's when you object to when they kill him, but not the actions that lead to them killing him. Robbie, we've had this conversation time and time again, and I don't know how to keep explaining it to you. Fleeing the police is not grounds to be murdered by the police. And
no, it is not. And I want to say something here. They have had these conversations before when Olayemi was a part of Rising. They've had these discussions before about the police. And what I've noticed is it seems like Robbie always sides with the police, even when it's clear that the police were apparently wrong. It's just something that I've noticed. But let's talk about fleeing from the police. This is another point that I think we really need to drive home. If someone is running away from the cops, they're running away from them, not towards them. If they are running away from the police, they are not a threat. We really need to drive this home, guys, because people always try to use this defense to protect the police state. If someone is fleeing the police officers, they are not a threat to the police. They are running away from you. They are not running towards you. So I don't like it when, and it's not just Robbie, I see people use this argument on social media multiple times. He was running away, so that's a reason to kill someone? If they're running away from you, they are not a threat. They're not a threat to you. I will continue to say that. Let's go on.
I need for you to stop creating this world and this narrative that police are above us. And so if we don't respond to their every command, if we have fear, if we have any different dynamic at play, it justifies the abuse. Whether or not he was in an accident, whether or not he didn't comply, whether or not he was running, you have yet to articulate where he posed the danger to them. We're killing him. We're tasing him 6 times as necessary. Everything that you're discussing is everything that you're saying is something that could be discussed. If he were arrested, if he were charged with a crime, if he were alive, they could maybe add resisting arrest or something else or have a reason, but nothing you're saying justifies why he's dead.
I mean, he did resist. He ran from the police.
Wait a minute. No, he didn't. I'm sorry.
Him being dead.
You can say,
but why is he being arrested in the first place? I I don't know. I don't want to live in a state where people think it is acceptable to murder someone because they ran away from the cops.
It's non-compliant to do what he did, which was to get up after being in the seated, kneeling position
and run away across the street.
No, he announced, "I'm going to the street because I want to be more visible." We have it on tape. He announced, "I'm going into the street because I want to be seen."
He was perfectly visible where he was in the first place.
You don't know that. First of all, he was up against.
I watched the video. No, he was in the middle of the.
He was up against.
There were people watching. There are bystanders in that video who say, "We can see you," etc.
Like I was saying, he was by a building with his back that
was kind of smug. I don't understand this part. Like, this just seemed kind of smug to me.
Because I want to be seen.
He was perfectly visible where he was in the first place.
You don't know that, first of all. He was up against.
I watched the video. No, he was in the middle of the.
He was up against.
There were people watching. There are bystanders in that video who say, "We can see you," etc.
Like,
watch this.
Like I was saying, he was
smug.
By a building with his back kind of next to a building, so you can't get a 360-degree view. Whatever you think of whether he was right or wrong about his visibility, he clearly articulated the reason for why he moved to the street. He did not run into the street. He did not run away. He was clearly not trying to evade arrest. He flagged down the police because he was in a car accident.
Exactly.
Stop trying to project this idea that he's a criminal trying to escape the cops. He's the one that called on the police to be on the scene.
And this is not the first time that something like this has happened. It was about over a year ago. There was a teenage girl in Ohio. I forget the name. This was Akron Police Detail. Teenage girl in Ohio. She called the police because grown women showed up in front of her parents' house ready to fight her. Grown women. These were adults. So she's the one who called the police. The police showed up. And guess who they killed? The girl who called the police. The one who was calling for help. So I think we need to state this again, how important it is that you understand this gentleman, he was the one who reached out to the police. So we've seen this happen before where the person who contacts them, usually when it's a black person who contact the police, they're the ones that are killed by the police. Let's go on.
And
that's
then,
very important.
Whatever you think about whether he should have been more or less compliant, he announced his intentions clearly, moved into.
Sorry, Columbus, Ohio. Columbus. Thank you. That was Columbus. Whoopsie.
The street, kneeled, and was on the ground. And at that point, while he was on the ground, we hear him saying, "You're going to George Floyd me. You're going to George Floyd me." The police says, "I'm going to tase you. I'm going to tase you." And the police, they don't tase him once to subdue him. There are multiple men on the scene, it seems, subduing him. They don't tase him once. They don't tase him twice. They tase him 3 times in 45 seconds. And the man, a father, a teacher, a 31-year-old, dies. That's the facts. And if you can't imagine, I'm sorry, Robbie, can you not imagine an alternate fact pattern that would have been geared toward preserving that man's life?
He was already on the ground. Like you guys saw at the beginning of the video, they already had him on the ground. And in my mind, at that point in time, if he's on the ground, he's laying on his stomach, his arms are behind his back, they could have easily just handcuffed him right then and there. I don't understand why they needed to tase him, and not just tase him, but tase him repeatedly. And they like to use this phrase, "stop resisting." They use this phrase even when people aren't resisting. I remember during the George Floyd protests, there was a teen couple. They were actually, I think they were college students driving back from school trying to get home. Now, during the protest, this was in Atlanta, they were not a part of the protest. They were in their car and they were trying to drive home. The police officers opened up the doors, tased these kids, and told them stop resisting. They weren't doing anything. So they like to use this phrase, "stop resisting." That doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually resisting. It's something that they say out loud. So especially if there are people around that are watching this action take place, they can say, "Well, we said stop resisting." So people will assume that the person that they're about to attack is resisting. But that's a perfect example. Those teenagers that were sitting in that car, they weren't resisting at all. And they tased those kids. Let's go on.
Also,
he got up, he
Also,
ran
no.
away from the police. They stopped him multiple times. They said, just sit still.
Robbie.
He did not sit still. They tackled him, then they tased him. It was a long period of non-compliance from him after he just crashed his car on drugs.
Robbie, for the love of God. Okay, first of all, you don't know that.
Why does he keep saying that he was on drugs? Why does that matter? I think Robbie is the libertarian for the show. No? I thought when it comes to something like drugs, like libertarians were totally cool with that. Right? Personal freedom?
None of that. You don't know how his car crashed. You don't know whether drugs had any role in that. People do cocaine and do weed all day, every day, and I'm sure you know it. I know a lot of people that do cocaine, and most of them are prosecutors.
I have no problem with it. I think drugs should be legalized, but you can't drive your car while you're doing it.
What? I think I have no problem with it. If you have no problem with it, then why do you keep saying that he was on drugs?
Robbie, you're so credulous of the police right now. You're the one who's always talking about not believing what the police say. We don't know anything about the levels of drugs in his blood. You don't know anything.
Robbie always has that I'm anti-recognize the problems with the police narrative until we're discussing somebody that was killed by
until I saw the video footage.
Robbie, we had this conversation. Do you remember when we were having the conversation where the police, where they shot the boy that was eating his sandwich in his car in the parking lot, and we had that whole argument, you talking about, oh, well, he was resisting. We need to keep having a conversation about lawful arrest. You cannot say, if we don't know what the grounds are for the lawful arrest, he approached the police. They weren't arresting him. There was no probable cause or anything like that. He approached them for help. So how is it so that he initiates this interaction with them because he needs help? And then somehow his turning away from that situation when he realizes he's being criminalized, when he realizes he's in danger because he wants to be more visible, now that's justification. He's resisting the encounter that he initiated. So now that's justification.
What I read is that someone else flagged down the police on his behalf because he crashed his car. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know.
That's the police narrative. See, this is something we have to remember. Kenneth is dead. We don't get to hear his version of the events. What you have right now is the police department narrative. And I will say this multiple times as much as I need to. The police department is not going to tell on their self. If they do something wrong, if they make a mistake, the police department isn't going to say, yeah, we really messed up. Turns out we probably shouldn't have tried to arrest him in the first place. He was asking us for help. We shouldn't have tased him. He was already on the ground. They're not going to say that. They are going to protect their self. So this is why when these types of reports come out, this is why I like to wait. Can we get more information? If the person's dead, you can't get that information except if you have like witnesses that were around that can tell more about the accounts. You need more video footage. We need to see the body cam footage, things like that. More of that information needs to come out because, again, you are just going by what the police are telling you. And how many times have the police been wrong? So it's really interesting. This is the third time I've seen Robbie defend the police, knowing damn well that the only version of events that you have is the police department narrative. So why are you so quick to take the police word when you know that there are two sides to a story? Let's go on.
I read that. And I think we have the video. We have the extended video so people can make up their own mind about what happened here. Let's take a look.
Hey, stop right there. Get up against the wall. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Get up against the wall. Please, sir, I didn't mean to. Get up against the wall. Get up against the wall real quick. Please. Okay, hold on a second.
Please, sir, I didn't mean to, sir, please.
Hold on, okay?
I'm sorry.
Against the wall.
Sir,
have a seat against the wall here.
Everybody got to see me, sir.
Have a seat
I don't want to be in the black. Over here. I want people to see me.
Sure. Okay, you can sit right there then. If you want to be seen, sit right there.
No, I don't want to sit right there.
Sit right there if you want to have somebody see you.
Please.
Come here. Come here.
Please.
Come here. Now! Get down over there! Turn over on your stomach right now! Turn over on your stomach right now! Turn over!
Yes.
Turn over!
Yes, sir.
Over on your stomach! Get over on your stomach!
Hold on. Okay, please. Please, sir, please don't do this. Please don't do this, sir. Please! Help me, please!
You know what?
Help me, please! No, please help me! Help me, please! Please!
So the question is, Robbie, him seated on the ground in the middle of the street with at least two officers there on the scene. Does it feel necessary to you for them to have tased him at that point?
As I said when we started this segment, I don't disagree with anything the police did up until they started tasing him multiple times. I don't know what police procedure is for how many times you're supposed to use a taser. Maybe tasers are too dangerous and shouldn't be used at all. That would be a conversation. I don't know. The decision, maybe tasering him multiple times was not called for. They had him on the ground. He was wrestling and fighting back with them after, like, they gave him many outs. If he had stood still, that police officer did not deploy the taser as its first line of action against this person who was, as you could see from that video footage, running through the street.
He wasn't running. I'm sorry.
Robbie,
you can say that he moved. He wasn't running through the street. There's no need to use hyperbole here. I'm sorry, Olay. Go ahead.
Getting into a car accident, whether or not you believe he's the reason for the car accident, people get into car accidents every day that they're at fault for, and that does not arise to a death sentence. That does not justify them being killed. That's one. So whether or not he got into this car accident, whether or not he's to blame, whether or not drugs are in the system, or whether or not he's running or acting erratically, or he's wrestling with them, none of that rose to a threat to those police officers' lives. None of that justifies why he's tased to death. And importantly, we need to stop doing this. You do this thing where it's like, oh, I don't disagree with anything the police did up until they killed him. What we're discussing is them killing him. So either you disagree or you agree with that. But this other discussion of everything before, no, what we're talking about is the fact that they killed this man. He's not alive. And importantly, when you want to discuss a scenario where police they didn't need to use this kind of excessive force. If they had listened to him, if there was compassion for the fact that this man is crying, he's saying, please help me, don't George Floyd me, perhaps they wouldn't tase him 6 times and kill him. But I can only imagine where that lack of compassion comes from when you are watching the video after the fact. They might not even know. Hindsight, they might not have known he would die, but you know he's dead. And you're watching the video still going, oh, well, I don't see any problem with that. And that is a problem because that's how it leads to an environment that fosters why police are able to do this and why we don't actually have the conversations about what shouldn't be allowed, like tasers and this kind of excessive force, because people, unfortunately, Robbie, like you, sit up and justify it.
Yeah, this is a big part of the problem. And this is why people can continue to make this argument. They were running away or they were resisting or they were not compliant, and they'll use those excuses to defend the police state. And it's something that needs to be said. And I think that the question we all still need to ask, why were they trying to arrest him in the first place? If he's the one that was trying to contact them for help, why are they trying to arrest him? I don't know, man.
I saw that from the police, though. I saw that they gave him a lot of leeway for a lot of time. That was not their first action with it. You're acting like they came up to the guy, pulled out their gun and shot him, which I absolutely would have objected to.
No, Robbie, I'm acting like they killed a man who got into an accident. That is what I'm acting like. I'm acting like they killed someone who didn't need to die, who was not armed, who did not pose a threat to them, who was not dangerous to them. And they have never once, no one here, including any of us, have been able to articulate that at any point in time, this man was a threat to them. So why is killing him necessary?
And yet people who do, and someone mentioned it earlier in the chat, people who do these mass shootings, they're taking it if they don't kill themselves first. They're usually taking it alive. Usually taking it. Was Dylan Roof tased? Was he even tased even? One of the things I thought was interesting that Robbie mentioned, he was running out into the street. So Robbie has a problem with the gentleman going out into the street because it could endanger himself. But it was okay for the police officers to tell him to get on the ground in the street and turn on his stomach. I don't know, guys. I don't know.
Robbie, it seems to me like you are agreeing that the force that was used that resulted in this man's death was obviously disproportionate, wrong, and likely illegal. We'll see what happens with this lawsuit.
I don't know if it's illegal or not. I don't know what the protocol for using taser is.
Hold on. You don't know whether or not.
I mean, maybe you know, Olayemi. Can you tell us?
Yeah, it is excessive force. It's very much of excessive force. So regardless, I just want to point this out. When we talk about his death, you don't know whether or not that's illegal. You don't know whether or not the excessive force that we've discussed numerous times is legal. But you do seem to know that he is responsible for this car accident, that cocaine and weed caused that. Please stop acting like you have all the facts and you know everything when it comes to vilifying and holding the person that's been killed by the police responsible. But suddenly you need an investigation and you throw your arms up when we're talking about what the police did, which is the subject here, that this man is dead. The police's conduct is who we're discussing, not his.
He's willing to take the police department's work. That's a good point because he's not willing to look as deep into what the police did.
vilifying him here. I don't.
You are,
what do you
Robbie.
make
Yes,
of
you
that?
are.
What do you make of that, Robbie? Do you see some inconsistency between your willingness to be credulous about who's at fault, or to kind of project an assumption about who's at fault for the accident, whether the substances in his system, no matter what amounts they were in, which we still don't know, were responsible for the accident, and whether, frankly, even if it's true, being the cause of a car accident qualifies you to be assassinated on the street? I mean, do you think there's a gap?
Well, I mean, Robbie said, what was it, a couple of weeks or so ago, that it was okay for the homeowner that walked outside and shot the 13-year-old boy who was trying to carjack a car, and come to find out days later that wasn't even the homeowner's car. Robbie was totally fine with that. I guess he's okay with people just being vigilantes, like the Green Arrow or Batman or something. I don't know what's happening here. It's really weird to me. I don't think property is more important than someone's life. Regardless of that situation, that's what you're supposed to call the police for. If someone's trying to take your car, and then we found out later on it wasn't even their car. So that's vigilante style. That is dangerous. So there's that. But I do feel like that Robbie was vilifying him when he repeatedly said he was on drugs. That's vilifying them. Because you're using that, that's looked at in a bad way, and you continue to use that talking point because that's going to say something about the character. So we see this happen a lot of times, right? In these police brutality situations, what does mainstream media do? The person who was killed, they attack their character. So-and-so was on drugs. So-and-so was a deadbeat dad. Oh, he had been arrested 5 times. None of that has anything to do with the fact that those people were brutalized by the police, murdered by the police. What they did in their past doesn't justify what happened that day on the scene. And so I didn't like it. I don't like it when Robbie just keeps bringing up that point that he was on drugs. So what? You're a libertarian. You're supposed to be cool with that anyway.
Between your credulousness about that stuff, but not credulousness about police behavior?
If you had just showed me the first clip, the clip that takes place last, the clip of the tasering, if you had just showed me that, I would have been pretty outraged that this seems way disproportionate. He's even saying you're trying to George Floyd me. But then when you show me all the times before that where they treated with him very reasonably and he didn't respond to that, I understand why they felt they neneeded to restrain him.
Robbie,
maybe they still tased him more times than they are supposed to do, and that they should be held accountable for that.
Listen to your language. Wait a second. Listen to your language. There's what happened and what didn't happen. He did not respond to the police. We saw him. We all 3 sat here and saw him kneeling with his hands on his head in front of a building. At some point he said, I want to be more visible, and got up to go to the street. Now, you can think that was a wrong decision, but you just characterize that as not complying with the police. And I got to say, Robbie, it seems like you keep overcorrecting to exaggerate what this man did. When I can agree that in an ideal world, he might have been alive if he completely laid flat, supine on the ground the second the police arrived after this car accident. Now, I don't drive. I've never been in a car accident. I don't think it's normal behavior, however, to once you flag down the police after a car accident, to lie down face down on the pavement like you're a criminal. However, I can acknowledge that perhaps in that world where he did that, he might be alive. But that's not the question. The question is the obligation of the citizenry to have such a relationship with a hostile, murderous police force that is the way you have to behave to guarantee that you're not going to die in a situation where you were simply in a traffic accident?
He wanted to be more visible so that more people could see what was happening. So he didn't end up like a George Floyd, but he ended up dying anyway.
I mean, it was his actions that led to that as much as the police actions. If he had...
But he's the one who contacted the police. Like, this is the part that for me is really, really frustrating. He called for help. He was asking them for help. The people who were supposed to help him killed him. This is not someone who the police were not after him. And even if they were, if you're running away, you are no longer a threat. I don't understand this. I really don't.
He could have kneeled the first, which he did, and then he ran off again. I mean, it's not. I don't think.
I don't understand what's funny about this. I don't think this is laughable. This is killing me. Like, I really don't think this is a joking matter.
I don't have any problem. Viewers are going to have to make up their own minds, I guess. Watching how the police handled him up until the point of the tasing, I don't think most people would disagree that they were handling that the wrong way. Maybe people feel differently.
I don't think most people like you would have a problem with Robbie, and I think that's very important. Like, let's make that distinction. Most people like you would have a problem with that.
Well,
I don't know what that means.
What do you mean by that, Ola?
He know what that mean. Guys, I think Robbie knows exactly what that means.
I do. Because this is a conversation we repeatedly have. It's very clear. Robbie never wants to make this position known in the sand. I've come up to talk to y'all about repeated people that have been killed by the police. And I don't know one time Robbie has had sympathy for the person. In every scenario, we start doing this nimble gymnastics and justifying the murder of this person. And never is a conversation about what the police did wrong or a need to justify. Because at the end of the day, you're saying, oh, I don't have a problem if he hadn't done what beforehand. There is no rule of law. The law is not that if you don't comply with the police, if that you resist the police or that you're afraid of the police or you don't follow their protocol the way that they would have it, or you don't subject to being criminalized the moment they choose to criminalize you. Because again, an important distinction is he flagged down the police for help. He was not a criminal they were seeking out additionally.
I mean, you're trying to portray me as a very, there are many examples, there are many videos where I see police misconduct, and I think it is misconduct because I think the things they ask the people to do are unclear, or there's so many no-knock raids in the middle of the night where the person is disoriented and confused.
So let me clarify.
A lot of examples of me thinking the police are handling things badly, to be clear.
Let me ask you this one last question, Robbie. Even if you think that Keenan Anderson did something wrong in his behavior, isn't the evidence of him having been killed with excessive force, it seems 6 tasings in 45 seconds, isn't that evidence that the police also did something wrong? Is that something that you can agree to? That the fact that a man is dead at the end of a traffic incident is not the way the police should be conducting themselves? And there doesn't seem to be a scenario where they should need to use a taser 6 times in 45 seconds on someone who was already on the ground.
I think I said that.
So okay, that's something I think that's worth acknowledging and emphasizing. That
I would also like to know what the training is with the taser, and maybe what they're recommended to do with the taser is inappropriate if it can result or frequently results, or I don't know what the statistics would be, is likely to cause some kind of grave harm. There should be some policy that you tase someone once, you don't tase them repeatedly. I don't know what they're instructed to do. That would be part of
it's worth asking that question, and perhaps Olayemi, you can come back and talk to us a little.
Oh, Robbie. Oh my God. That was interesting discussion. That was an interesting discussion. I'm just always weary when people are very quick to, number one, believe the police, and number two, defend the police at all costs. Very weary of that. But we are going to head into call-in in just a couple of minutes. Eric, I think I forgot to put the call-in link on the... Oh, you did it. Okay, you got it. All right. We're going to head into call-in in a couple of minutes. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll come back, and then we'll go over to call-in. So much happened today. Look, I got one topic, which is the Claire Daly interview recap, but a lot happened today, so feel free to explain or say what you want to say. Before you go, make sure you go ahead and smash that like button. But if you do want to hear quite a bit of a venting session tonight, feel free to join me on call-in. But I'm going to take a break and I'll be right back.
All right. I think we got the call-in tonight that people have been waiting for on this Friday. Excuse me. Let's see. Yeah, it's been an eventful day, but an interesting one. We'll see what everybody's got to say on call-in. We got a few chats here. Let's say Joe said, Robbie is full of opinion without even considering the fact. In my culture, we call him a wasiku. Loosely translated, it is someone who takes all the meat and leaves just the fat for others. Thanks for that, Joe. Deneen said, the cops find a way to deal with the resistance when the person is white. And then Betsy, can we have a poll asking whether or not people want to smack Robbie? Yeah, I think we know that would get a pretty good percentage. And thanks for this super chat, Staccato David. When people show you who they are, believe them. Yeah, I mean, one thing it seems to me with Robbie in that he's kind of, he knows his role to play, and he's kind of the guy who's supposed to be there giving excuses and acting dumb on purpose. And I don't know, I guess it's hard to know with him how much is real and how much is an act. I mean, he certainly has that smug look down quite nicely. One of the things he said that I thought was really off was that he said that it was the guy's actions as much as the police that is why he ended up dead. And it's actually a what do you call that? It's a false equivalency, because the police have a very different have a very different set of standards than the public. In that the police they're sanctioned to do violence, they're sanctioned to detain people, arrest people, and so forth. And so it's not right to say, oh well, it's he did that and the police did that. I mean, it's in fact, from what I've heard, as soon as you are detained by the police, your safety is actually completely their responsibility. And if anything happens to you, they're liable. So this whole idea that, he should have done that or he did this, and I don't even see, why they were detaining him in the first place. I mean, as soon as this cop comes up, he's barking orders at the guy. And I did really like the way that Brie framed it in terms of, do we really want to live in this world where we're just subservient to any police orders, any police presence. It's just yes sir, no sir, or else you end up dead. And I think that's a good question. And of course Robbie doesn't care, because that's not his world. He's a rich white son of a white guy, and so he's never gonna have to deal with police giving him that kind of a hard time. So, he's fine with it, which, basically makes him a sociopath, is what I'd say. This one from Carrie: what did you think of the Merriam-Williams interview, honestly? Maybe we'll save that one for call-in. There was a lot going on with that, a lot of different angles all over the place. But let's see what else we got going on. I do want to make sure that I plug tomorrow night when we start hitting about this time. We're going to have a special event. Instead of calling after the Sabby show, we're going to have a panel that's going to be over on my channel. Let me see if I can find my thumbnail. Yeah, I got to bring up my thumbnail. Here we go. And it's going to be hosted by myself and by Corey here. Calling it Forum 11. It's kind of be talking about the 11 demands and about the concept of having a demand-based movement. Oh, we got somebody asking, how can I listen to call in? Here, I'll put it in the chat. It's also pinned to the chat. If you hit, is that going to come up? Come on, here we go. If you hit this link in the chat, that'll bring your browser right into the call-in. When it starts, you'll be able to hear it. You have the option of calling in. You can put it on your smartphone, all that good stuff. Yes, thank you, Betsy. Wicked Pissa time coming up tomorrow at about this time. All right, so we got me, you got my man Corey, we got Sabby Sabs will be participating in the panel. We've got Courtney Banks, we've got Colin, and we've got Reef Breland. And actually, Lucy had to drop. I changed that thumbnail. Lucy had a conflict and can't make it, but we got the rest of them. So that'll be tomorrow around 10 or so. So it's kind of this concept of having a demands-based movement, which means don't get focused on people, don't get bogged down, arguing about over people, arguing about over parties. What I'm trying to pitch is that if you have a good coherent set of demands that you base your movement on, that you start your movement on and go from there, then hopefully we can get away from some of these issues where it's this person or that person, or and so forth. But We'll flesh that out tomorrow, right?
That's right. Tomorrow night after my live stream, we're going to go over to Eric's channel and we're going to do that panel. And also, don't forget, Glenn Greenwald will be here tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So yes, I've had a past busy couple days. Busy day today, busy day tomorrow. So don't miss that interview. I have like so much to ask him. I've been wanting to ask for like a long time. So super pumped and excited for that. Now, Colin, let's go ahead and head on over there. Eric, I need the screen back, I think. So tonight it's episode 75, Claire Daly interview recap. Let's discuss my interview with Claire Daly about UK strikes, Russia and Ukraine, war, and Julian Assange. Those were the topics that we covered earlier today on the interview. We're doing, like I said, I'm doing pretty good on call-in. I'm really surprised, but I love talking to you guys. So love to see you over there. Also, other topics that we talked about tonight. Usually when people call in, they'll also mention some of the other news stories we covered tonight as well. I'm sure you guys have some questions for me considering the events that transpired earlier today. So this was going to be a venting session for me tonight. If you don't have the app installed, that's okay. You can also listen to call in on your computer. The link is pinned to the top of the live chat. You could also call in from your laptop too. So come check me out over there. All right, guys, today has been crazy. Okay. All righty. You know how we do this. Let's head on over to call in and have a good night. Keep up the fight.